Well, hello there. So we're going to be making a small gift bag in my essence stitch. And so I've already, done most of the length of the bag here. So I'm just going to start it again to show you how to start and then get into the stitch. But this is the essence stitch. And the back side, which is really attractive, and the front side, which is really attractive too. So I've been trying to decide, because both sides are really nice, which side will be the outside of my bag. Either side can be. They're both really nice. Now you can make a big purse if you'd like. All you have to do is be wider and use the same techniques. So you can make any size of bag that you want, but I wanted a small gift bag, so that's what I made here. Okay, so put this here, and I've got more of the skyline, so we can get started in the same yarn. Just have to find the end of it. Here it is. Okay, so I'm using a 5/8 inch loom. This is a Cindy Wood, and Cindy Wood did this to be like the purple Nifty Knitter loom. It's 5/8 inch gauge, 48 pegs. So I'm just going to make a slip knot, put it on the starter peg, and I'm going to cast on with the chain cast on. So I just take my loom hook, just going to zoom in a little bit here. There we go. I take my loom hook, put it in the loop, pull up the working yarn, but you can do any cast on that you want. I just like this one because it's nice and neat and I like the way it looks. Okay, now all you do is take the loop, put it behind the next peg, take the working yarn, put it through the loop, and tighten it up. And you can take this yarn here and tighten it to keep it nice and tight. Okay, behind the next peg, working yarn through, tighten it up, next peg, working yarn through, tighten it up, next peg, and just go as wide as you want your bag to be. And this is certainly wide enough for my demonstration. I believe I used 10 pegs on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I used 10 pegs to get that width. Okay, so now I'm just going to go back across this in an E-wrap, or I mean a U-wrap. So just a U-wrap back. And that finishes the cast on. Okay, and then we go right into the stitch, and I'll do one row of the stitch on here. So we come back around, and I'm just going to knit off, but you can do any edge you want. If you want to slip the edge, you can. We're going to be sewing the edges together, so if you have an edge you like for sewing, I like to just use this one. Okay, and then we're ready for the next. We're ready to do the essence stitch. So we just do a purl, and then we knit around, or we knit over it, and that's the stitch. That's all there is to it. So we just do a purl, come back and knit that, and that's all there is to it. That gives you some work here. Okay, purl. That's such an awkward angle, but I have to have it in the video. Okay, purl, come back over it, and knit it off. Purl, there, maybe that angle will work better for me. Purl and knit it, and purl and knit it, and then the end peg. Okay, and so that's going to give you beautiful, beautiful texture in here. Okay, so I'll just clean this up and we'll get back now and we'll start on here. Okay, I'm back. So we'll do another row here on this one. So you just purl and then knit backwards, and there you go. Purl, and there's lots of videos on purling if you don't know how to do it, but I'm sure that this should show you enough, because you're just taking the working yarn, putting the hook in, pulling the yarn up and through, and then putting that loop on the peg, and then we're coming back and knitting it off. Okay, purling, coming back and knitting it off, purling, coming back to knit over it, and knitting it off. And that is the essence stitch. And because it has a purl in it, it doesn't curl, although I have lots of stitches that don't curl and they don't have purls in them. But this one does. And then the last peg. Okay, and you just keep doing that back and forth until you get as long as you want. And how we're going to do this bag, to give you an idea, is I want mine to be about this size right here, that size. So this is a good place for me to almost stop, because I'm going to have a flap that comes over it. So you want to get how long you want your bag to be, and then you want to be long enough to have a flap come over it. And then you can put 2 buttons on and attach it like that. I'm going to put one big button on because this stitch is quite stretchy in the spaces. So be able to get the button through. And then some thread or thin yarn, that is a good color to stitch up the sides. Okay, so you just keep knitting until you get the length that you want. And I'm just going to do a couple more rows, and then we'll catch up when you have it long enough that you want to start doing the process we're going to do on the end. Okay, so now that we have the length we wanted, I'm just going to decrease a bit at the sides. And the reason I'm going to do that is when this comes over to be a flap on something, these because I'm putting the one button on, these sides are just going to bend and be really funny if you don't decrease it a little bit. So how I'm going to decrease it is I'm going to take the stitch that's here and move it over here. And then I'm just going to take this stitch and move it over here. And now we've decreased one peg. So now we're just going to come back. So we're just going to knit this like we're regularly coming back. And then we're going to knit this the same way. We're just going to take these two stitches as one and purl them. We're coming this way, we knit over this way and work our way across. So I'm doing the purl, knitting back the opposite direction that we were going. Whoop. And knitting, or purling I mean, knitting the opposite direction we were going, and purling, knitting the opposite direction, and purling, and knitting the opposite direction, and purling, and knitting the opposite direction. And then we just put a knit on this peg, and then we're going to move this peg over to this one, and then we can move this one over. There we go. Okay, then we just come over like usual to go back, and we're going to take two as one. Now, how many pegs you want to decrease depends on how wide you want your bag. I'm just going to do a couple on each end because this is a small bag, but you can do more for a bigger bag. You just decide. Or if you don't want to decrease at this end, you don't have to. You can put two buttons on instead. But I wanted to have a nice flap with one kind of a closure that I liked. And I found a nice big yellow button that I like. And knit over. And then we're just going to move this one onto this one, and this one over here, and just come back as normal. Okay, and then we're just going to purl the two strands here and do the knit. There we go. And my yarn's getting a bit tangled up here. Okay. Purl, knit back the opposite direction, purl, knit back the opposite direction, purl, knit back the opposite direction, and the last one. Okay, then we just knit over this one. Okay, now we're down to one. So we're going to take this and move it over here. And this one and move it here. And then tighten that up. There. Okay, we can look and see how narrow are we getting here. And see, we've come in a little bit. I still want it to come in a bit more. We're just decreasing. Okay, so we're going to do another 2 and see how that looks. So come over here like normal. Purl the 2 together. Knit it. Purl. Knit the opposite direction. Purl. Knit the opposite direction. Knit the opposite direction, and we're at the last peg here, and we just knit it. And take this one, move it over here, and this one, and then tighten that. Come back over, knit these 2 as one. Well, purl them as one. Okay, and come back over and knit it off. This yarn is really tangling on me. Okay. Purl, knit, purl, knit, okay, and then we just decrease this side. Bring the stitch over here, bring this one over here, tighten it, and then we're just going to knit across. Purl, knit, purl, knit, and the edge. We can take a look at the size of our flap, and it's gotten down to be a lot smaller. I'm pretty happy with that. So then we're just going to bind it off. Okay, and you can do any kind of bind off you want. It's only 4 pegs, so I'm just going to do an easy basic type of bind off, very loose. So I'm just going to take number 1 peg here and E-wrap it, and keeping it really loose. So loose. I've got a great big loop here. See, nice and loose. Put it on here and then hold it to keep it loose and knit it. And then just another E-wrap, keeping it nice and loose, putting it on the next peg, knitting it off, E-wrapping it, moving it over to the next peg, knitting it off, and E-wrapping it the final time. I'm just going to take it off now. And you can see what it looks like here. And then you can just sort of adjust it a little bit to get it looking just the way you want it to look. I'm tightening it just a little bit here at the end, and then I'm just going to take the working yarn here, put it through, pull it, and make a little knot. And there we go. It's bound off. Bag's going to come up like this, and then it's going to come over like this, and then we're going to have a little button for it. Okay, so first we have to do the side. So I'm going to get my needle and thread, cut this off now that I've done this. And I should have left this one longer to sew the sides. I don't think it'll quite be enough, but it doesn't matter. And I'll decide what side I'm going to use and get my needle and thread and see you back in a few minutes. Okay, so I got this needle, and this is just, I've cut this yarn and I'm just going to weave it in and decide what side I'm going to use. Okay, this is going to be my inside here. And so you're just going to weave it into go. And then I'm just going to come back. Whoop. That's okay though. Just come back and then put the yarn back in here. Needle. There we go, and then I'm going to weave it a third time. Just want to make sure it stays secure. And put the thread back in. So if your thread's ever a bit short, this is how you do it. You put the needle in, pull the thread through, and then you can just pull it through. And there. Okay, and then we can cut it off. There. And that thread's all done. Then what we're going to do is figure out how far you want this flap to come down. Because the button's going to come up and through it. So do you want to have this come far down? Do you want it to come a little ways down? You decide what you think is attractive. I think I'm going to do about here. And maybe a little bit more like this. There. Yeah, that looks fine. So I've decided that this is where I'm going to start. So I'll start with the piece of yarn that's here, and I can add more yarn later. And we want to sew it on the other side. So I'm just going to leave this here to mark it. And then I'm going to get 2 stitch markers. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm just going to take a marker, and this is where I want to attach it. So through this loop, I'm just going to put a stitch marker. Then I can take that down, and then I want to get it as straight as, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, I'm going to get it as straight as possible. And you can go by your line of stitch. And take your time. And then you just put the other marker in the other side. And then you can take your time making sure that these markers are even. You look at the line of stitches should take you to the same place. You can test it with putting your corners up and folding over your thing. So then you're just going to flip it because you're going to sew it on the back. There, this back. Okay. So then you're just going to thread your needle. And the first stitch you're going to go into is the one where the stitch marker is. So what you're picking up are the 2 stitches that are at the side here. Picking those up all the way along. So you're going to come in where this was, and that will attach this piece right here. Okay, and then you can take the stitch marker out. So here you are in this hole here. So you're going to look for the next place where you have the 2 stitches, and you're going to go through that to the other side, and you're going to look at where the thread came out, and you're going to go back in there. Or you can use any method that you notice, sew the sides. You don't have to use mine. Okay, now I'm going to come back down into the next, or not come back down, I'm going to go into the next 2 stitches right here. And then I'm going to come over to where I came out over here, and you can open it up to look. Where did you come out over here? And go back in there. And then I'm going to go down the next one. And you can tighten it up at the end. That's why I don't have to be tight now. And then I'm going to go back in where I came out the other one and go down into the next one. I'm going to come back up to the one I came out of. And then I'm going to go down the next one. And this is getting short. So what I'm going to do is come up the last one. And I will firm this up. Make sure you don't over pull it. You don't want to pucker it. You just want to tighten it up. And it will look fine on the other side. Okay, and because this was so short, I'm just going to tie it, knot it, and hopefully you left a longer yarn. And I'll just put another knot in there. And then later I will sew this one in too. So I'm just going to get some more yarn and cut myself a piece here. Longer this time. And thread my yarn. Okay, and then we'll just go on from here, working our way down. So I'm going to look where this one came out of, and I'm going to go back in there. There we go. And I'm just going to tie these 2 piece of yarn together to secure them. There we go. I'll have to weave them both in later, but that's okay. And it's on the inside of the bag. Okay, so now we're coming out of the one that we left at. So I'm going to come down the next one. There we go. It's out of my way. And then come up the one that we came out of before. And then come down the next one. And come up the last one we came out of. And down the next one. And up the one we came out of. Should be able to do it in one motion. Okay, and down the next one. And up the one we came out of. And down the next one. Whoops, on this side. And up the one we came out of. And down the next one. The one we came out of. That's all you do. Down the next one. Up the one you come out of. And here's the next one. Back up to the one we came out of. Down the next one. Up the one we came out of. And down the last one, which is right here. Back up the one we came out of. And then down the last stitch on the other side. Like that. And then tighten it. And not so it buckles, just so that it's tight enough at the sides. And before, I'm just going to make sure it looks good. And it looks all good. It's attached at our bag. So I'm just going to knot it. There we go. And tie another little knot. And it'll be another piece to sew in. There we go. Okay, now you're going to do the same thing on the other side. You're just going to take a needle and a needle and thread, attach it, put it in where that one is, and go down the sides. So we'll catch up after you've done that. We'll just take a quick look at this one once we have it all straightened out. There we go. Pull on the stitches and whatever. And that's just a nice little side of the bag. Now we just do the other side, and then I will see you when you've done that. Okay, and then you just flip your bag around, and then you, after you're finished that, and you kind of stretch it in here where you did the seams gently, and stretch your stitches. Make sure that the sides out so they're nice and square, and stretch the whole thing here. There, get it all straight, and then you're going to fold it and decide where you want your button to be. So, and then I'm going to mark that with the stitch marker once I get that all figured out. I got my stitch marker here. I'll use the green one. Okay. All stretched out. You want it to look straight. And want it to be big enough for what I have, so I'm going to be putting my button about right here. So I'm just going to mark where I'm going to put my button so I don't lose the space. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to attach my button right here, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I've attached my button to the bag where I wanted it. Gonna do it up there, and stretch everything out now. It's all together the way we want it to be, and stretch our stitches, and there we go. Cute little gift bag. Buttons up, and you can put whatever you want in there. And I like to give my gifts in a little bag when I can, or do whatever I can homemade. And it's a real pretty stitch. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, bye.